Now it's time for our practical examples. In our first practical example, our customer was generated on April 1st, and during the first billing period, used services for $3. When the billing period was closed, the first invoice was generated. Let's look at different parameters of this invoice. This previous balance is 0 because it's our customer's first invoice. The customer didn't make any payments during the billing period, so no payments are shown in the invoice, and the invoice total will be $3, which corresponds to the amount of the services used. The amount due is the sum of the previous balance and invoice total minus payments. It is going to be $3 in this case. The invoice status is unpaid because the grace period for this customer is set to 30 days. And today is April 25th. Okay, on April 2nd, the customer uses services for $4. After the second billing period is closed, the second invoice is generated. The previous balance of the second invoice is $3. It is the amount due of the previous invoice. Okay, no payments were received, so payments equal 0. Invoice total equals the amount of services used in this case, and the amount due will be calculated as the sum of previous balance and the invoice total minus payments. 3 plus 4 equals 7. The status of this invoice will also be unpaid. Okay, and now let's see what happens when the third invoice is generated. During the third billing period, the customer used services for $3 and made a payment for $5. Okay, so as soon as the payment was made, it is applied to the first invoice that requires a payment. So $3 go immediately to the payment of the first invoice. Nothing changes in the invoice PDF because the payment was made after the billing period was closed. However, we will see the information about the payment on our web interface, and the status on the web interface will change to paid. After we apply the payment to the first invoice, we still have an extra $2, which will be immediately applied to the second invoice. $2 is not enough to cover the second invoice in full. That's why its status is going to change to partially paid. Okay, and the third invoice will look like this. The previous balance of the third invoice is going to be the same as the amount due of the second invoice. The payments will be included in the PDF of the invoice because this payment was made during the billing period. The invoice total is going to be $3, corresponding to the amount of services used. And let's calculate the amount due. The amount due is previous balance plus invoice total. 7 plus 3 equals 10, minus payments. 10 minus 5 equals 5. The amount due of the third invoice is going to be $5, and its status is going to be unpaid because we didn't even have enough funds to cover the second invoice. Let's look at these invoices on our web interface. This is our test customer invoicing test 11. Let's go to invoices and taxation, issued invoices. And what we have here are the same invoices that we've just seen in the presentation. Let's look at our first invoice generated on April 1st. Its period total is $3 and the paid amount is also $3. Let's open it. There is no previous invoice balance. The invoice total is $3. The amount due is also $3. And there are no payments here in the invoice PDF because they were not received during the billing period. They were received after the billing period was closed. And we also see the charge for services here on the second page. Let's go back and look at the second invoice. The second invoice has a period total of $4 and the paid amount is $2. Its status in the system is partially paid. The invoice total is $4 because we used services for $4 during this billing period, but there is also a previous invoice balance of $3 from the previous invoice. The amount due is the sum of the previous invoice balance and the invoice total, and it equals $7 for the second invoice. As in the case of the first invoice, no payments were posted during the billing period, so they're not shown in the invoice PDF. They are only displayed on the PortaBilling system in the paid column, $2. And the third invoice has a period total of $3. Let's check why its status is unpaid, okay? Okay, we had a charge for $3 for services. You can see these charges here. We also had a payment for $5 that was applied to the two previous invoices. Our amount due is calculated as the sum of previous balance and invoice total minus payments received. The invoices were generated in the PortaBilling system exactly as they were shown in the presentation. Before we jump into our second practical example, let's remember how to add a payment method for the customer. For that, we have to go to Personal, General Info, Payment Method. Here we already have one, but if we didn't, there would be an option Add Payment Method. If we want to charge our customer's credit card automatically upon generation of an invoice, we need to make one more configuration on our customer class. Right under Grace Period, we have Automatic Credit Card Charge Settings. We're going to choose upon an invoice generation. There are additional attempts possible before the due date and after the due date. If the credit card was rejected, we want to make an additional attempt 3 and 5 days after the due date. Of course, if the charge is successful 3 days after the due date, there will be no other charge 5 days after the due date. Whenever possible, it is always a good idea to configure automatic credit card charge in the system. Imagine our customer who has a number of subscriptions and actively uses the services every month. They receive an invoice and they have to remember to pay it. And if they didn't remember, the administrator's job is to remind them and to make sure that the invoice is paid. This is quite an unpleasant situation both for the service provider's administrator and for the customer. The ideal situation is that the invoice is paid upon its generation, and this is the goal of our administrator. Once we activate this setting, the invoices are going to be generated with a do not pay status, and their amount due is going to be 0. The customer doesn't have to worry about unpaid or overdue invoices, and the administrator and the service provider therefore receive the funds quicker and increase the chances of the invoice being paid We are ready for our second practical example. Here, in our second example, our customer was created on April 1st and has a daily billing period as well. During the first billing period, they used services for $3 and also entered their credit card on the self-care portal. On April 2nd, the invoice was generated and the credit card was charged immediately. The invoice was generated with the do not pay status. The invoice total is $3. The amount paid is also $3, and then no previous balance exists because it's our first invoice for this customer, so the amount due is 0. Let's go to our test customer, invoices and taxation, and check the invoice. Okay, here is our invoice. It was paid in full. And let's open it. Okay, so there is no previous balance. The invoice total is $3, which corresponds to the services used. The information about payments received is also included in the invoice PDF because the credit card was charged upon the invoice generation. Our amount due is the invoice total minus payments is $0. And we have one more practical example to look at. Our third test customer was created on April 1st and also has a daily billing period. During the first billing period, he used services for $5 and made a payment for $10. Okay, his first invoice was generated after the billing period was closed, and its status is also do not pay because previous balance is 0, of course. The invoice total is $5. The payments amount is $10, and the amount due is minus $5. The extra $5 that the customer paid were placed in the virtual piggy bank called unallocated payments. As soon as a new invoice is generated for this customer in the system, these $5 will be immediately applied as a payment to that invoice. Okay, so during the second billing period, April 2nd, the customer used services for $5 as well, but didn't post any more payments. The second invoice will also be generated with the do not pay status, and this is how it's going to be calculated. The invoice total will be $5 because the customer used the services for $5. No payments were posted, but previous balance from the previous invoice remains. It's negative $5, and the sum of negative 5 and 5 gives us 0. Let's look at these invoices on our web interface. Both of them were generated with the do not pay status. Okay, let's open them one by one. Okay, this is our first one that covers the billing period, the first billing period, April 1st. There is no previous balance. This is our first invoice. The invoice total is $5. That corresponds to the services used, and the payments were received for an amount of $10. So the total, the amount due is therefore 5 minus 10 minus $5. Okay, and let's open the second invoice as well. Okay, this invoice covers our second billing period. The previous balance is negative $5. The invoice total is $5, and there were no payments posted during this second billing period, so the amount due will be the sum of the previous invoice balance and the invoice total. It will be $0. During the first billing period, the customer paid $10, but he owed the service provider only $5. Those extra $5 were placed in a piggy bank into unallocated payments and were taken out of it immediately when the second invoice was generated. Since those invoices were generated about a month ago, we didn't have a chance to look at the unallocated payments in the system. Let's go to another customer that does offer such an opportunity for us. Let's go to Finances, General Info, and we will find unallocated payments here right under Total Outstanding Balance and Overdue Balance. This customer has $10 in unallocated payments. In this tutorial, we've covered a lot of essentials. We've learned about the most important invoice parameters. We've discussed invoice statuses and gained an understanding of the billing periods that are available in the PortaBilling system. We also performed basic operations with invoices and had a chance to look at a couple of practical examples.